So welcome everybody to this latest Macklin's Take YouTube episode with me, Andy Clark, and Matt Macklin. And for this one, we are going to get stuck into Canelo, Saul Alvarez, the undisputed pound for pound number one, because he fights this weekend against Avni Yildirim, defending his WBC and WBA super middleweight titles. And as I say, he is the best fighter on the planet. He is also the biggest box office draw on the planet. He's got to that kind of level now where he calls the shots, a bit like Mayweather did a few years back, to give a recent example. There have been others down the course of boxing history too, Oscar De La Hoya, Sugar Ray Leonard. The list could go on, but it's not a particularly long one because these kinds of fighters don't come along that often. And the reason that they can get to the level they get to in terms of that marketability and that financial sway, if you like, is purely down to how good they are in the ring. Without that, you don't get anywhere. So, Matt, simple yet probably quite difficult question. Why is Canelo so good?
I mean, I suppose right now he's, I think he's what you call a complete fighter. He can literally do it all. You know, he can pot shot if he has to. He can walk you down. He can counter punch. You know, he's up on body movement, punching off that head movement. I mean, you're just, for example, let's just look at his last fight with Callum Smith. A dangerous opponent, you know, genuinely probably the best super middleweight in the world outside of Canelo. And look how easy he dealt with him. He just completely neutralizes, nullifies his opponent. So he just takes everything away from them. Now, how does he do that? Well, if every time you throw a punch, you get hit with a sharp counter, or you miss, you hit fresh air and you waste energy, and the guy steps on you and makes you feel under pressure, it's not going to be too long before you start overthinking everything, hesitating everything. And then what happens then is you've just stopped throwing, because that in boxing, we're talking split seconds. So when you hesitate that split second, you've missed it. You know, you hear about fighters when they retire talking about, I couldn't pull the trigger. That they haven't slipped like levels. They just can't pull the trigger quick enough. They see it, they think about it, and they've missed it. You know, they've hesitated for that split second too long, and it's gone. And when you find someone like Canelo, I imagine, when you can watch his fights, you know, you see them. These are guys that normally are fluids, that put combinations together, that are confident, that have got good poise and composure. But you can see very quickly with someone like when they fight Canelo early on, you know, he's neutralized them. He's taken everything away from them, and that's because, you know, we talk about dictating the terms. That's exactly what he does. He can take control of the fight. He takes everything away from them. And it's that speed. It's the counter punching. It's the pressure with his feet. It's the whole package, obviously. But the fact that, I mean, I'm just looking, again, just going back on the Callum Smith fight, because it was the most recent one. I know how good Callum is. And he stopped George Groves. He was genuinely, you know, number one in the division outside of Canelo. And it looked like a really easy fight for Canelo. That's how good he is. You know, I remember Gary Lineker talking about Diego Maradona when he died, saying he was unplayable at a certain period in his career. And I feel like that's where Canelo is now. He's untouchable. And it's, you know, you can't just pin it on one thing, I don't think. I think it's the fact that it's the complete package. But certainly the fact that he, when you throw a punch, you either get countered or you miss. I mean, his defense has improved massively. I think the Canelo that fought Mayweather was fantastic. You know, obviously he was a really offensively unbelievable fighter. His speed, his combinations, they were fantastic. But I think where he really improved, and probably what he learned in that fight, what took him to that next level, is his defense now. I don't think his defense prior Mayweather was anywhere near what it is now. You know, his combination punching and speed, maybe that was probably still there, but I think his defense now has just hit gone through the levels. You know, his head movement, and you see him like even when he punches off that head movement, and like you say, when you're a boxer then and you're a good fighter, but you're throwing your shots, and every time you throw a punch, you get stung with a counter, or you throw a combination, you miss, and you hit fresh air, and you think, oh, I've wasted energy there, and then he steps on you. It's like all of a sudden, you know, you're under pressure, you're burning nervous energy, and you're hesitating, you're overthinking, because you're scared to throw. Because the last time I threw that jab, he caught me, so now I'm thinking about it too much. Next thing, you become redundant. There's nothing happening, and he just picks you apart then.
That's definitely something that's evident when you watch him fight and when you watch other really elite level fighters operating, which is that there seems to be two different fights going on. You watch them and they're calm, they're measured, they're taking their time, but then opposite them, just a few feet away, is someone who looks like they're almost in blind panic, like they're fighting in fast forward because they just can't seem to get anything done. It's a weird thing to look at sometimes, but he is that kind of fighter, isn't he? It's like watching a horror film where you've got, you know, the unkillable zombie who just keeps getting up and walking his opponent down, if you like, and the other guy's running for his life, but you know that he's going to get caught at some point. There's just no escape.
Yeah, completely. I mean, and you mentioned the elite levels, and there are levels, and there is that elite level, and there's, you know, I think it's a term that gets massively overused, but certainly Canelo is absolutely, I think he's the pound for pound number one really now. And you know, Golovkin was elite level, and you see the two of them at it, and you know, Shane Mosley and Oscar De La Hoya back in the day when they fought their first fight, they were both absolute elite level, pound for pound. And a term I used during the Luke Campbell Lomachenko fight was, it might look like there's not a lot happening here, but trust me, there's loads going on. And that's, you see that when you see those two elite level fighters boxing, you know, Golovkin, Canelo, because they're just, you're literally dealing in the tiniest of fractions, the smallest of margins between slipping a shot and getting hit flush with one. And, you know, and like I say, you know, Mayweather was, you know, the best of our generation, and you look what he did with Canelo. But I think the Canelo now, I imagine that Canelo now, if you were to ask him, he would tell you that loss to Mayweather was probably the single biggest lesson that's made him improve, because I think he's really, I won't say altered his game, but he's added to it. Like I say, his offense, his attack, his power, his speed, his combination punching, that was very evident from way back, you know, when he was very young. But I think as he's matured, I think his defense has been the thing that's really, really stands out now.
And what all of these elite level fighters, and as you say, true elite, you know, it's a small band of brothers, that it really is. What they all have in common is unbelievable dedication. And Alvarez turned pro at 15. He stuck with the same team all the way through. There's never been the merest suggestion ahead of any of his fights that he was in anything other than amazing shape. He lives the life, and he's lived this life his entire life.
Yeah, to keep improving when you're already that good, and to keep improving. Obviously, it's the fights. You're at that level where you're boxing other great fighters, and each fight takes you up a notch, and it only has to be little bits, you know, because the higher you go, the finer the margins get. But you look at the likes of Canelo, and you look at the likes of Mayweather. They're not just training when they've got a fight. You know, they're not just training when they've got a fight. They're always training, so they don't lose shape. They're not training for weight, these guys, because they're not ballooning up, because they're staying in the gym. They're working on aspects of the game. They're constantly perfecting little areas. You know, but I'm just thinking of the Canelo one. But like I said, I was just drifting back to the Mayweather fight. You look at that fight, God, it shows you how good Mayweather was. But then I don't think that's the same Canelo that we see now. But that's boxing, isn't it? That's timing. You know, that's the changing of the guard, so to speak. But you know, look, we haven't even mentioned his body punching. We've seen that obviously against Rocky Fielding, because Rocky Fielding was levels below, and he was able to just plant his feet and bang those body shots in. But I suppose when you're at that top level, you're boxing the likes of a Golovkin, and it's, you know, you're not getting that long to set and get your shots, but these guys create these movements. That's why they're always feinting. And, you know, like I say, we're talking tiny margins.
And just finally, I think one thing which could be really good this year is that we could see him 3, maybe even 4 times. He boxed Callum Smith in December. He's boxing the end of February. Billy Joe Saunders, as long as he beats Yildirim, will come in early May. He'll have time for 1, maybe 2 more fights. So now he's been a twice a year fighter since 2012. The last time he boxed more than twice in a year was in 2011. And we all know the reasons why. When you become a big name, as TV, the schedules, there's finding the right opponent, getting the right fights, deals take a long time to make. There are all these kinds of factors. But when you become the man, which is what he is now, all of a sudden then you decide what happens. And if he decides he is going to fight 3 or 4 times in a year, then that is what will happen. And I just think that would be a great message to send to the whole sport, really, that if the biggest name can get out there, stay in the gym and get out there 3, 4 times a year, then what's stopping everybody else?
And that's how it should be. We did the deep dive chat with Adam Smith. We talked about Nassim Howard, and you've done a little bit of research, and you rightly stated that he boxed, like, I think it was 5 times, 6 times, 5 times, 4 times, and 5 times going into that. So 20 had, so what's that, 20 fights in like a 4-year period. That's when you can perform to your best, because you're sharp. That's when you don't blow up and down in weights then, because you're constantly in the gym. You'll have a week off and you've had a fight and whatever, but you're straight back in, really. And that's when you get the best. That's when you make your most improvements, and that's when you get your best performances. I think, when I look back on my own career, I think when I look at the inactivity, and like you say, you're waiting on a date, it was the boredom that killed me. I mean, you've got to take credit to Mayweather and Canelo. They lived the life in between, even though they're only boxing twice a year. But I know certainly the boredom killed me. I have every intention of getting back in the gym. But of course, then, you not get a date, you lose motivation. Next thing, you're blooming up and waiting. You think, I'll start tomorrow, I'll start next week. And of course, tomorrow never comes until it had to. But, if Canelo can box 3 or 4 times a year, it's actually scary to think how good he might be performing then, because it really is the activity's key, I think. I don't think he's at the case now where I don't know if he can develop anymore, you know what I mean? But just staying sharp and really getting the most out of these prime years is brilliant. But when I lost my chain of thought before, I know what it was now. Something Mayweather said going into the Conor McGregor fight, which didn't matter. We knew the Conor McGregor fight was an exhibition. So really, so it didn't really matter. But everyone was talking about how big McGregor's going to be on the night. And they asked Mayweather, what you think about how heavy he'll be? And he said, size doesn't win fights. Fighting wins fights. You think about that, and you think, you see these elite levels like the Canelo, and you see them going up and down weights and taking catch weights and all the rest of it. And you think, they're that good that size just doesn't come into it. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't matter that someone's that much bigger. Like, say, Callum Smith, some of the guys that Mayweather fought, it doesn't matter, because they're that good at fighting that the actual size and physicality really doesn't matter. It doesn't, because it doesn't become a factor in the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what's always great about watching a master at work. They're just not worried about that. I still do. I always love Golovkin too. And people would always talk about, oh, well, he's not the biggest middleweight. Doesn't matter. Never mattered at all. So we'll leave that there. Canelo, as we say, boxing after Yildirim at the weekend. It'd be pretty amazing if he doesn't manage to retain those 2 super middleweight belts, and then we think it'll be Saunders in May, and then who knows after that. It's just interesting to have a little look at these people sometimes and just explore exactly what it is that makes them so good. So thanks for tuning in. Have a look at the other content on the YouTube channel. It's expanding all the time. And do get across to iTunes, Spotify, wherever you pick up your audio podcasts, and have a listen to this week's offering with Frank Smith. Frank will be at the fight, actually, actually about Eddie Heard's unbelievable bit of work to team up with Canelo after Canelo got his way out of the DAZN deal. I mean, that is proper Houdini shit. So they'll be over there for that fight. Frank was on great form when we spoke to him. He's always good company. And coming up next week, Matt mentioned it, we've got a deep dive into Nassim Hamed against Kevin Kelly with Adam Smith, who was absolutely on fire when we recorded it with him yesterday. He remembers everything like you just wouldn't believe it. So that'll be well worth it. But we will be back on YouTube again soon. As I said, thanks for tuning in. Have a good rest of the week.